this is per Parcel Bombs on this, and this is a reliable source. Imran Daniel Abdul Hazli, Hazli, with a UTR of 12.15 of Malaysia, has verbally committed to Baylor and will join Baylor for the fall of 2024. The 19-year-old has an ITF Juniors career high ranking of number 91, winning 5 singles titles and 7 doubles titles. He is a lefty, by the way, and his ATP ranking is also 1,915 in the world. So I am not sure that he will contribute in the singles lineup for next year. It's not that I don't think he's a bad player. Oh no, he's a good player. He is good. It's just there's returners. But he could certainly contend with them, and maybe he could play up to the 6th spot. And like I do think 3 through 6 is going to be and this is no particular order on this, by the way. Like a Luke Koenig, Oscar Bostrom Poulsen, Louis Bowden, Marko Milanovic, Ethan Musa, Aman Zubani. I really do think those guys are competing for that 4 through 6, and one of them is definitely going to be a 3. It's a matter of who. Unless they add a transfer that's clearly a 3 or a 3, but you get the whole point. Doubles is a who knows situation. Maybe he does contribute in doubles right away, but I don't know. It's up to Michael Woodson on that, and as well as the staff, of course. And we're going to wait and see if they add somebody else, whether it's another freshman for the fall or even in the spring of 2025. Or they add another player like a transfer. And supposedly they added Quinn Van Wyk, W-I-J-K. I apologize if I butcher that, from Omaha. But the guy who posted it took it down, so I don't know if it's really going to happen or not. And But with this freshman addition, I assume he's going to be a freshman, if nothing else. This new addition, it builds the roster back up to at least 10 players. It's always good to have depth because you never know with injuries. And 2 years ago, they had injury problems. And that's kind of why they were not as good last year. Besides losing the top half of the singles lineup. It's just telling the truth. And this past year, they did have injury/sickness, but it was not like prolonged all season long. But at the same time, they were very young. Half their singles and doubles lineup were underclassmen, and hopefully they do get better. And some of the matches, like the Arizona match, they were right there at the ITA kickoff weekend final, right with them. I mean, and that's a team that made it to the Sweet 16, and obviously they did push TCU twice or 3 times. Yeah, twice overall. I mean, the regular season and all in Fort Worth, the Big 12 tournament, and even at home. Actually, yeah, all 3 times. Now, I know there was 4-1 scores in the last 2, but it was more complicated than that 4-1 score line when you look at it. So I'm just telling the truth. And they even pushed Wake Forest and made to a Final Four this year. So you know what I mean. They're right there with those teams, and hopefully they do take that next step to be like around a Sweet 16 team again. I really don't want to say round of 32 or worse again, but but it's all about the matchups, to be honest, here. And maybe if nothing else, get to the round 32, but I don't know if that's even enough for the fan base at times. But improvement. Obviously, if the two get to Elite 8 would really be helpful, especially when you are playing at home. But it all depends about matchups, like I said. And we're going to know the roster probably like right before the fall events began, like right before the fall. And of course, right before the spring, because they could always add somebody else for the spring. And if, like, best case, right now they have 10 players assuming he signs with Larrington, which I think is going to happen, because it says will join Baylor for the fall of 2024. And I kind of always thought they were going to add somebody as a freshman or a newcomer that's not probably not like a transfer type, but more like you're new in all this. So yeah. And like, not to go too long here, but I don't know. I do think TCU will take a step back next year. They lost to half their singles lineup. Prime example. And even if they do lose Jack Pinch and Jones, that would really hurt them unless they add somebody else. But even then, I don't know if it's going to be as good as Jack Pinch and Jones. And I don't know about Pedro Vives and Lou Maxted being at 1 and 2 if they do lose Jack Pinch and Jones. But even at 2 and 3, I'm not so sure. Because the 4 through 6 is going to be sophomores. They just don't have a lot of depth. Kind of like this past year. And Baylor pushed them in all those meetings. And I know there were 4-1 score lines. But it was more complicated than it really was. Than the score really was. And they were right there with TCU at TCU in the non-con. I mean, I do think Arizona is going to be good, but I don't know how good. Like top 16 good, possibly. Arizona State is going to be sneaky good for next year. They got a solid top 3. They just need to figure out the bottom. And I do think if they do figure out the bottom and in doubles, I think they could be a top 16 seed or possibly a top 8. I don't know. I was like UCF did lose to half their singles lineup in doubles, so I don't know how much better they're going to be next year. I don't know. Oklahoma State should take a step back because they did lose 4 seniors and a player to the transfer portal. So it's a matter of how much of a step back they're going to take. Texas Tech, I think they'll improve, but I don't know how much because when they lose the top 2, that's pretty painful. BYU, I think they're still going to be one of the worst teams in the conference. Utah is interesting because they have added some players, but I don't know if it's good enough to really contend for the conference. So hopefully they do improve their conference record going to next year, and it's definitely helpful that Texas and Oklahoma are out of the conference. It makes the conference more winnable, if not like number 2. And the good news is too that Baylor men's tennis for the next 2 years will not have to play an ITA kickoff weekend because they are co-hosting the ITA National Indoor Championships with SMU. So that does help not to have to worry about that, but they can always schedule somebody else. And hopefully they win those bigger matches and beat the teams that they're supposed to be. Like they should have really beat UCF last year at home, but they didn't, and they lost doubles and lost 6 sets, and they lost 4-0. You can't expect to lose doubles and 6 sets to come back and win. You just can't do that. Simply put. But they pushed Wake Forest. They pushed TCU. Ohio State, yeah, they won the doubles point, but Ohio State won 4-1. I mean, I'm just telling the truth about this. And they were right there with Oklahoma State last year. And I do think Baylor will be better than Oklahoma State. It's a matter of how much better is the big question. And we did beat Arizona State at Arizona State last year. Remember that, guys. So, it's possible. We'll have to wait and see on the schedule, too. And all this. So, anyways, it does affect whether or not you're going to be a top 16 seed or a top 8. Because there's a difference. Because if you're just top 16, you're going to be hosting only the first and second rounds. Unlike top 8, you get to host up to 3 rounds. And possibly, since Baylor is hosting the NCAA tournament this year, Elite 8 onward, they're hosting that. So maybe they could play it on their home soil, on home turf, all the way to the Elite 8. Possibly, but it all depends about matchups, and hopefully they do improve from the last 2 years with Grind 64 exits. But I would say 2 years ago was injury bug, and yes, Vin Bassett did come back, but he was never the same player coming off of injury. And last year they had to have like injury/sickness, but they were also a young team. Half their lineup in singles and doubles were underclassmen, and hopefully they do take that next step forward. So, anyways, if you like this content, hit the like and subscribe button. See you guys later on the road to 700 subscribers. Of course, ultimate goal. It's 1,000 more, so make money off this. Of course, like a video, comment video, really helps YouTube algorithm so more people can see it. Sharing the video does help as well, so more people could watch. And if you're watching and not subscribed, hit subscribe buttons, hit the notification bell as well.